Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this very important webinar about how Australian businesses can navigate this energy crisis we're in. Couldn't come at a more important time. A big thank you to Choice Energy's network of partners who've supported this event. Obviously, as the news is reporting a lot, there's a huge amount of pressure on energy costs for business owners. Like myself, I'm a business owner. My name's Dave Collins. I run a video production business called Angry Chair, and have the pleasure and privilege of being a Choice Energy customer myself. Welcome along to this. We're hearing from Christine and Alan Gill, and the last 15 minutes we'll have opportunity to have a live Q&A as well. So plug in your questions as you go along if you hear things that you want to know a bit more about. But we'll kick it off with Alan Gill, the Executive Director and Co-founder of Choice Energy. Alan, looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Dave, and welcome to everybody who has joined. Certainly it's a very topical, I guess, moment of discussion for us all across the nation. My name is Alan, and I'm the Executive Director and Co-founder at Choice Energy. And I'm going to be running through a little bit about the state of the market to begin with. So I guess, Dave, you mentioned being a business owner, myself and my business partner, Chris, on the call as well. We feel the same pressures as many of the people online today. Then this kind of, you could put those into two kind of buckets, I suppose, of pressures, the uncontrollable pressures and the controllable. Some of the uncontrollable pressures that we're all facing at the moment on a macro level are things like the cost of living, inflation and possible recession around the corner, and also access to talent, trying to find and hire the right people whilst increasingly paying them more and more super, and perhaps having to be a bit more flexible as an employer as well. So these are the kind of uncontrollable market pressures that we can't perhaps do much about. But certainly one area that we can look to control, which is an extreme pressure for many businesses today, is energy. So over the last sort of 9 to 12 months, we've seen the price of energy skyrocket, and gas as well. And there could even be pressures for carbon reporting and management around the corner. So what have we seen? Well, I suppose there's been record wholesale prices of energy. So that's where your retailers, the people that send you your energy bill, that's where they go to buy their energy if they're not generating that. We've seen that go right through the roof to an unprecedented level where the market was even suspended for a few days. And there's many, many reasons behind that. It's a multifaceted problem, which means that there's not going to be a silver bullet or one simple way to remedy it. Part of that problem certainly has been the aging fleet of coal-fired power stations, many of which are over 40 years old and constantly have to be shut for maintenance or outages. And we've seen weather events like fires and floods in New South Wales and Queensland in particular add to that. In addition, there's a roadmap for how quickly we are due to shut these coal-fired power stations that did extend out toward beyond 2050, but is rapidly coming forward to create quite a steep curve downwards, as many of the assets are not government owned, they're owned by private entities, and the commercial viability of keeping them open is reducing day by day. So we're seeing the roadmap to shut those coal-fired power stations down really come forward, which is creating a supply and demand, I guess, pressure in the market. Now, historically, we've turned to gas. When the price of burning coal was too much, gas was a nice, cheap, not as cheap, but nice, cheap alternative. But unfortunately, the pressures from gas prices overseas, where we've been selling gas to countries that don't necessarily have the natural resources we do, has seen that we've had to pay domestically for gas very similar to what we can sell it for overseas. So gas is not the cheap alternative that it used to be. And because of this, some retailers are even unwilling. You might have seen some announcements recently that retailers don't even want their customers. They've been encouraging their customers to go elsewhere. So many retailers have pulled products dependent on the state as well. So access to the market just isn't what it was. And whilst we don't have a crystal ball, if history does teach us anything, with the amount of prime ministers that we've seen change over the last sort of 15 years, it's to say that the government, even those who have given it a good go, like Kevin Rudd, like Julia Gillard with her carbon tax, even those who have given it a good go have been unable to control this market pressure. Now, if you've got a business that's based in Queensland and New South Wales, unfortunately, you guys are doing it very, very tough compared to the rest of the market at the moment. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, the national energy market connects all states apart from the Northern Territory and Western Australia. So whilst there may be local pressures in Queensland, you will feel those in a trickle effect or a ripple effect, even far as South Australia or Tasmania. But in New South Wales and in Queensland in particular, we've seen rates from increasing on a contract level starting in 2023. If you had arranged that contract maybe 9 months ago, you would have be something like on an 8-cent peak. If you were to go to market today for the contract, that could be over 40 cents. Now, those of you that are in Queensland but outside southeast Queensland and on the Ergon network, that's the only place in the country where your retailer is also allowed to be your distributor. So a lot of retailers don't participate in far north Queensland and really outside of the southeast Energex area. That means that the choice of retailers is less, and the companies located in rural Queensland definitely need to make more effort to ensure that their bills are accurate, that their network costs are under control, so those are charged by Ergon through the poles and wire charges, and also to look at the business case to see how they could generate their own power, which is often a lot cheaper than the price of grid power there. Now, Victoria and Tasmania have been less as hard hit, but really for context, the cost of power there over the last 9 months on contracts has gone up 176%. So a business that was contracting 9 months ago to start in calendar 2023 would have been looking at something like maybe 60 grand, if that's the kind of way that you're using power and what you're used to spending. If you were to arrange that same contract today, 9 months later, you'd have to find an additional $105,000 for the same power. So what you might have been budgeting for $60,000, now you're going to have to budget $165,000. So certainly less affected, but definitely if this was in isolation, it would make front page news. In South Australia, we've seen, because of the connection to the national energy market, we have seen a knock-on effect, but also because of the efforts to go away from coal-fired power stations. We saw northern power stations shut many years ago. South Australia does have that backup in gas. So when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, the cost of gas has meant that the state has been very vulnerable to the cost in generating energy. And over the last 9 months, we've seen an increase of around 186%. So certainly, if you've got a business that's based in South Australia, you should be working with an expert to understand the crisis and to have a strategy in which you can navigate through the crisis as well. Now, a little bit about Choice Energy. We are a team of energy geeks. When people say they're passionate about what they do, that definitely applies to Choice Energy. We've been going over 9 years now, and we've helped more than 5,300 businesses across the whole of Australia and New Zealand to try and reduce their spend on energy. And we're an independent company, so we're here to guide the customers in what's best for them. We're not tied to any one retailer or technology. We're there to assess what is best for our customers, help them to plan for that, and guide them through the crisis. And I'm happy to say that we partner with more than 50 preferred partners, anything from associations to buying groups, many of whom you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, pleased to support us today. And we thank them for that whilst we put their customers and their members in the best place possible. Now, if you're on a small market contract, which typically is using anything less than 160,000 kilowatts per year, or if your bills are less than $2,500 as a rough guide, that means that you can change your energy provider whenever you want to, or your energy retailer whenever you want to. And for those of you that do have that ability. Now you're not as exposed as greatly as the C&I or the large market contracts, which I've just previously spoken about. So really, whilst reviewing your contract was a good idea annually, I would encourage you to get someone to do that for you, like Choice Energy, who can do all the hard work, can see what is available. And whilst you may have been on a great deal, that can change quite quickly. So most retailers will have changed their prices within the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks. So if you're in Queensland, New South Wales or Tasmania, you may have noticed those price increases on the 1st of July. And in South Australia and Victoria, you'll notice them when you receive your bill in August or September. Now, the last thing I would encourage a small to medium business to do is just look at the feasibility of generating your own power. If that's cheaper than buying it, then that's a fantastic alternative to grid power. Now, if you're a large market business, so typically spending more than $2,500 per month, the first bit of advice is never, ever wait until the end of your contract. So if your contract, which many are, is coming up on December 31st, 2022, I would urge you to speak with Choice Energy straight away to plan and navigate your way through that. If you wait right until the end, the difference can be very, very costly. And certainly if you don't organize your contract before the end, then you'll be put on default rates, which are often very, very hard to meet financially. Work with a Choice Energy consultant, because timing is everything. We had a lot of customers when the market felt an artificial low last February as we came out of COVID in a particularly cold summer for Australia, that is. You can probably tell by my accent that every day is a summer day for me. But as we came out of a particularly cold summer, we found that the wholesale prices of energy were low, artificially low, and we work with our customers to forward contract. So you don't need to wait until your energy contract is coming up to arrange your next one. Often, if we can find a window where either looking at blending and extending your current contract, or organizing your next contract, even if it's to start in January 2024, for example, if we can do that at an artificially low or a lower part of the market, we will do that. So you can take advantage of today's low wholesale and gain the advantage tomorrow. We find around about 30% of bills are inaccurate for large market. Now that can be, there's quite a few component parts to the bill. The part that most people focus on is the energy charges from the retailer. So that's your retail portion. That can vary from anything to 20 to 30% of your contract. But certainly get that validated, because when you do pay your bill, your retailer will keep that 20 to 30%. Your network provider, the guys that own the poles and the wires, will keep somewhere between sort of 40 and 60% of your contract. And the rest will go into environmentals and metering as well. It's quite a complicated compilation of different charges, with different parties getting the monies that are owed to them after you've paid your bill. So an inaccurate bill is definitely not something you want to be stuck with. In December, we found around about 30% of bills were inaccurate. 96% of those that were deemed inaccurate were inaccurate in the retailer's favor, so the customer was out of pocket. And what we were able to do is take the interval data, the customer's contract data, and the data from their bill, and contest those. And I'm happy to say that we were successful in contesting all of those to get the customer a credit on their next bill. Now, those network costs that I just mentioned, the guys that own the poles and the wires, there's nothing that you can do to move away from a PowerCore or a Gemini or a SA Power Networks or an Endeavour and an Ergon. They own those poles and the wires. But what most people don't know is that every year, the network providers release new tariffs. So you may be eligible to move to a new tariff that's more reflective of the way that you're consuming and demanding power. And you can do that mid-contract. It's got nothing to do with your retail energy contract. And then the last thing, of course, is with solar, if you can generate your own power cheaper than all of this, cheaper than buying it from the grid anywhere, then that's certainly something to consider. And the business case for solar, certainly over the last 2 years, has changed a lot. So I would encourage you to explore that.
Ripper, thanks, Alan. We'll hear from you again in a little bit as well with a bit of a future outlook. But it's great to hear from you. And now to hear from the other co-founder of Choice Energy, Christopher Dean, CEO and co-founder. Thanks, Chris.
No problems, Dave, and thank you, Alan. Alan did talk to generating your own power on site, and I just wanted to talk to a couple of slides on that, including an example cash flow, because although solar's been around commercially for around 10 years, many people have seen different ways of doing it. So just to take you through a little bit of a history, though, I started in solar in 2011, and at the time you couldn't finance solar. So for a business who wanted to explore generating their own power on site, they either need to come up with a lot of money up front and wait for a long return on investment, or they had to tie finance to their residential home. And being a business owner, that's normally something that's not too advisable. We've seen solar panels go from 160 watts to 500 watts in the same time. So you can see here that the price has fallen by 80%, but the efficiency is also increased. But one of the pitfalls of a new industry, which has been one of the fastest growing industries in the world globally for the last decade, we've seen more than a typical amount of businesses fail. And one of the reasons for that is navigating a newer market. Government grants, we've seen lots of examples of businesses around government grants fail. But for me, it's the purely transactional model of solar. Once you put solar on a business's roof and get paid for it, there tends to be no more reoccurring revenue. And that sees a lot of booms and busts in the market. And then finally, if you buy a car, you can go to carsales.com and check comparable cars. If you're looking to buy a house on a nice street, you can go to realestate.com. But if you speak to 3 solar companies about a 20 or a 200 kilowatt system, you'll likely get 3 different stories. So hopefully we can bring some clarity to that today. Now, what may make you a good candidate for solar? Typically, you need to have at least a 5-year view in a building, be that owning the building outright or having a lease. Either way works. I know commercially, in Australia, about 50% of businesses are leased, but that doesn't disqualify you from solar. What would disqualify you is an asbestos roof or too small a building. If you're in a CBD, for example, and you've got 10 buildings sharing one roof, that makes it pretty hard to put panels on your roof. Or if you have shade from a neighbouring building. And typically we look for a business spending about $400 per month or more. Now, businesses in Ergon or in WA, where you don't have as many options to switch retailers, solar is the real main thing you can do to tackle energy costs. You're literally putting your own power station on your roof where you create wholesale power during the day. How much does solar cost? Well, our aim at Choice Energy is to make it cost less than you spend right now on power. And shortly I'll take you through an example of that. The way we do this is utilising different upfront grants and some grants that pay out over time. And depending on your state, there's also some local initiatives. Up to 100 kilowatts of solar, you get small technological certificates, which get paid in an upfront hit. Above 100 kilowatts, you get LGCs, which is a larger scale scheme. Temporarily, you can write off 100% of the investment in solar against your tax. That does expire in June 2023. And for all the bean counters on the call, historically, you would depreciate solar at 10% per year. This year, you could depreciate it at 100% in the very first year. So if we couple an upfront grant with these tax incentives, that could cover half of the investment. And then what we look to do with the other half is use some form of clean energy funding, where a bank like Macquarie will put up the capital and finance it back to you. And what we're looking for is your savings on electricity being more than the payments on solar. Here's an example cash flow. So this was an actual business in rural New South Wales. We've just taken a 10-year snapshot here. This system creates just under 2,500 kilowatt hours of power per month. It creates more in summer and less in winter. And at an average rate of 28 cents per unit, the savings you'd see on an electricity bill would be just under $700 per month. And we've factored in an increase of about 6 cents next year for this particular business. So the savings, as the cost of power go up, the savings increase, but the cost of solar doesn't. If you look to the solar payment column there, the finance over 84 months for this solution was $502 per month. So the way the savings work, you save from your retailer $680, you pay $500 for the same amount of power, and automatically you've got $180 left in your pocket over the first year, and that will increase over time. And if you go to the far right, by depreciating 100% of this system in the very first year, that's around a $9,600 tax saving for this particular business. And if we take our eyesight down to year 7, at the end of 7 years, you've paid off this solar system and saved $40,000. Now, down the bottom, you can see that the system has a value of $43,000, but we've set this up so it hasn't cost the client $43,000. They've got a $43,000 solar solution for $40,000 less than they were going to spend on their electricity bills anyway. Next slide, please. Now, where do these savings come from? If we're looking at a 10-year spend of $110,000 for 2,500 kilowatt hours per month, those payments of $500 per month equate to just over $40,000. The net savings on electricity becomes $80,000. And if you add your $9,600 tax benefit, you're home and hosed using money you're spending on power to save $80,000. So some considerations: if you've got a 25-year warranty on a solution, you need to make sure you're dealing with a business that's likely to be around. So I would look for a business that is able to make money outside of just solar. Our shameless plug here at Choice Energy is our diverse business model. When we went into lockdown and we were unable to install solar for 3 months, we were still able to help thousands of businesses with their energy procurement, which also generates revenue for us. Keep an eye out for something that sounds too good to be true. The most expensive way to do solar can be cheaply. You may save 5 or 10 grand on an installation, but if it doesn't work and you don't get your savings, your net result may not be an $80,000 benefit over 10 years that I've just taken you through. We've seen a lot of businesses that will go door to door selling cheap solutions, and every 24 months they pop up with a new ABN number. You want to look for a guarantee outside of the manufacturer's guarantees. So all solar panels come out of Asia. There's nothing wrong with that. But if your system's down for 2 weeks, a solar panel manufacturer is not going to be interested in your loss of generation and savings. So at Choice Energy, we actually underwrite the savings. Each 12 months, we ratify your generation. And if we are short, we cut you a check for the shortfall. So we have some skin in the game to make sure the system performs. Keep an eye out on businesses who are trying to cover your whole roof with solar. Obviously, the more panels on the roof, the more a solar company gets paid. But if you create excess power, we're seeing 5 or 6 cent feeding tariffs out there at the moment. And if you're paying 25 to 30 cents, but selling it back to 5 or 6 cents, it's hard to get a return. I often get asked about PPAs, which stands for a power purchasing agreement. There are solar companies out there that are big fans of this, and a lot of retailers also sell PPAs. And they've definitely got a lot of upsides where you don't have to acquire the solution yourself and have the upfront cost. One of the challenges with the PPA at the moment is you miss out on all the tax benefits because it's not your asset to depreciate. In summer, solar can create 50% more power than the average of the year, but each extra unit of power that gets created under a PPA agreement, you have to pay for. So we've done PPAs in the past, but at the moment, our advice is to steer away from them because of the magic storm of tax incentives and upfront grants. And then just keep an eye out for a Clean Energy Council certified retailer and installer. The governing body is the Clean Energy Council, but many companies are not verified and certified by the Clean Energy Council. So that's something to keep an eye out for. One thing they do with Choice Energy is audit our installations. Yeah, and there's no one auditing a lot of these cheaper businesses who tend to sell solar like selling an appliance. You can get yourself a cheap solution, you get panels on your roof, and that's it. You need to manage it and make sure it works and make sure that you're getting the savings. That's where I would steer clear of mostly. And then batteries. So each month we're doing batteries. We tend to do them a lot more on a home. Conceptually, if you're at work during the day, creating power at home, it's just going straight back on the grid. So capturing that energy to use at nighttime makes a lot of sense. Commercially, most businesses use most of their power during the day. We're seeing a return on investment for solar somewhere between 2 and 4 years. Once you add a battery, we're talking 8 to 10 years. My advice currently to our clients is install a battery backup ready solar solution. Come 3 to 4 years down the line, once the cost comes down and the technology improves, you can then retrofit a battery to your existing solution.
Ripper, thanks so much, Chris. That's sensational. I remember when you and I first spoke about this a few years ago, I nearly fell off my chair hearing the business case for it. And it's obviously gotten so much better, as you say, with the magic storm that's kind of playing out in terms of incentives. Now, an opportunity to hear again from Alan about what's happening. What does the future of energy look like? I hope you've got a crystal ball, Alan, or something similar to tell us what's coming up.
Thank you, Dave. You've stolen my opening line. I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately. And if I did have a crystal ball and I could have foreseen the crisis that businesses are under when it comes to energy costs at the moment, I certainly would have been lobbying a lot of people a long time ago. And actually, that's quite an interesting segue, because what we could have done with is a government that took more than a 4-year view. Once they're in power, often the next goal for them is to stay in power, rather than look at these kind of macroeconomic and environmental issues that we're faced with. And unfortunately, after a succession of governments, no one has really taken accountability for the state of our energy grid. And so whilst I don't have a crystal ball, I would certainly wager that the higher energy prices are here to stay. The government can't control the situation. I'm not saying there's nothing that they can do, but there's definitely no silver bullet. And if there was, then we would have seen that by now. So certainly, if history has told us anything, is government can't control the situation. I think that, the reduced incentives for solar, I don't need a crystal ball for that one, because they are reducing beyond June 2023. So those federal funding and state funding that Chris spoke about in that perfect storm of instant asset tax write-off and funding from the government as well, that is scheduled to reduce. So I am sure that will happen. I am sure that we will see a continued acceleration of the closure of coal-fired power stations. To give you an example of that, Eraring in New South Wales was due to shut in 2032, but they gave their 3.5-year notice and will now shut 7 years early because the commercial viability of these keeping those coal-fired power stations is not what it was. So, if Chris alluded to bean counters are telling the generation asset owners to shut quicker than expected. So I definitely expect that to accelerate and some more announcements to come forward as well. And then the last thing is, I suppose, just as we have all become used to using tax accountants to solve what is a guaranteed and very complex problem in tax, we're not expected to become tax experts, keep our mind over what opportunities are available and things to avoid. We put our trust in certified professionals, and that's what I think will happen with energy. Energy used to be a good thing to have a plan for, and now it's an absolute necessity to be guided through this crisis. It is a bit of a nightmare, but if you've got an experienced helmsman on your boat and they've got a Choice Energy hat on, that's a needless plug, wasn't it, Chris? I should say that you're in good hands, but I do expect more than 95% of businesses will turn to an energy expert to guide them through, not just now, but ongoing, because the goalposts are forever changing. And so just 3 or 4 key takeaways from today's discussion before we get into a Q&A, and I'll hand back to you in a moment, Dave. If you are a business on this call, or if you are responsible for a community of customers and members, like many of our preferred partners are, I would encourage that energy contracts are reviewed regularly, and certainly by an expert as well. There are many hidden costs to energy that can be addressed both inside and outside of a contract. And even if you're one of the large market businesses, I was at a conference in Queensland this week actually, and many businesses were saying, it's okay, I've contracted early and I'm contracted until the end of 2024. They hadn't reviewed their network costs, which actually has a far bigger effect on their bill than their contracted retail rates, or it certainly can do. And so we've been helping a lot of them this week, and we'll do next week as well. So just because you're in a contract doesn't mean that you can't optimize your energy spend. I would say work with a broker. So timing is so important. I alluded to it earlier, where we knew last February there was an artificial low, so we encouraged our customers to use that timing to their advantage. And that's not just waiting and saying don't wait until the end of a contract. That's knowing where the market is at in the particular state, and using a broker or an expert to help you through that. And the last thing is, if you haven't looked at solar, Chris alluded to a perfect storm. Things have changed in the last 2 years. And now with the federal funding and an instant asset tax write-off, the business case probably has changed. So you should look at it again.
Thanks, Alan. So good. And the great news for all of us on the call is that we've got some bonus time for questions. So if you do have a question that you'd like to throw in the mix and hear from these energy experts, you got your energy experts here to answer some questions. So thanks, Claire, already for popping a question in the chat, but feel free to jump in and throw them in now as well. And maybe I'll kind of kick it off with a question to you guys, which is very much about my own video production business, energy requirements, and it's kind of leaning into quite a lot of what you've covered across the whole thing, which is that I really treat your team at Choice Energy like my own energy experts. And my question is, a lot of your dot points about reviewing energy bills and checking to see, whether or not solar is a good option and all that kind of stuff. I actually just, a busy business owner, I'm sure a lot of other people on the call would be the same as this. I pick up the phone or I send an email to your team or to you guys and say, hey, how are things going? Can you help me with this thing? You guys know what you're doing. Can you have a look? And you're extremely helpful. My question is this, is that okay? Am I doing the right thing there?
Dave, that's what we're here for. We've actually been inundated the last 3 weeks with business owners like yourself, just getting a letter from the retailer, clicking forward, C. Dean at Choice Energy, A. Gill at Choice Energy, hey, check this out, and it's their rate increase notice. We work with 20 retailers. It's a free service to get a comparison. We put your meter number into our portal and it will pop up with the best rate. 1 in 5 times the rate you're on will be the best rate, and you've got some peace of mind. The other 4 out of 5 times, we can help facilitate a switch.
Yeah, ripper. So when I saw Claire's question come up about, how complex the application process is for getting the grants for commercial solar, I immediately went to, well, I think I know the answer, which is that I don't have to worry about it at all. I just have the conversation with you guys and your team will look after it. There might be a time process, but I, as someone who hates forms, that's what your team does. That's how that answer goes.
Spot on. There's apps now. So to claim the upfront grant, which depending on the size of your solution, you may or may not qualify for, there's an app we use. We actually have to take a photo of all of the panels. And some of the installs, we do a 500 panels. So we get the electricians on the roof with their smartphone. They'll upload all the documents and then they'll walk over to you on site and you'll get your index finger and you'll put your initials. And then the credit will happen for the government grant. So we do all the application, all the verification, energy safe in your relevant state. A third party has to check it off. The only job of a client, besides clicking forward on an electricity bill to get in touch for us to do an assessment, would be working out if they wanted to finance it or pay for it themselves. And we hold their hand through that process as a part of our feasibility. So a typical feasibility would be a 5-minute chat over the phone. We would get a bill. We then measure via satellite your roof. We design the right type system. We then go to the government and ask how much they will contribute. We put together a cost benefit analysis similar to what we ran through before, Dave. If you're happy with that, then you tell us to get to work. And we really think that you could spend 15, 20 minutes on a project that may go for 3 months, but we would handle all the ins and outs.
And that's a cool thing. And Wade's asking the question maybe everyone else is asking who hasn't worked with you guys in the past. What are your fees? What's the cost from you guys to us, the business owner?
Yep. So for solar, we get paid to install solar. So if we sell $100,000 solution, we get paid $100,000, and in that we buy all the equipment, we pay our electricians, and we make a margin. So, hands up, we get paid to install solar. But what we're looking for is that 100 grand solar solution may create $200,000 worth of power, which would make it 100 grand cheaper than what you're doing now. And if you can finance it, so savings on electricity pay for it, you don't actually have to put in the 100 grand. You just keep spending power the way you are now, but part of your outgoings go to your retailer and part go to solar. And for our energy procurement, if you're just interested in better rates, if we switch you to a new retailer, the new retailer pay us a finder's fee. So that would be free for you. You would only switch if you got a better rate, and we get remunerated 30 days later by the retailer for bringing them business. So we get paid, you save, and the retailer gets a new client.
Sensational. That sounds, as a business owner, like quite a good arrangement. I'm interested in that. If you can encourage other suppliers to give that as well, that'd be good. And then Colin's giving you guys a bit of a shout out. So renewed in Feb 22 gas and signed for 2 years. David and your team helped save 120 grand a year over the next 2 years. So great story from Colin. Thanks for sharing that.
I think I might know Colin from Ace Metal, and we met, and rates had gone up a little bit, but he contracted 4 months early, and we were able to find out how much he would have paid if he didn't go to market early. And it was a little bit eye-watering at the moment. So it's a no-brainer to talk to us. Even if you decide at the end of the call not to use us, we won't charge you a fee for having a chat.
Great. Colin's from Butler Market Gardens, but yeah, that's awesome. And then Alan, maybe this one's for you. Is there a lower limit to how much usage a business needs to be spending to be looking at to get you guys to look at the bill and look at whether or not a better provider option on the existing bill or to look at a solar kind of solution is there someone who would be spending too little to be considered an opportunity for you guys?
No, I don't think so, Dave. I think so, certainly not on the energy to procure that from the grid. It's more just the intention of wanting to optimize their costs. Like I said earlier, we've got a team of energy geeks, so it's almost like a bit of a challenge for us. We often, have discussions internally about what's best for the customer. It's kind of a bit of a challenge for us, and we'll never look to advise a customer on a strategy that's going to put them in a worse position. The worst experience a customer could have by contacting us would be peace of mind, knowing that a team of energy geeks looked at it and we weren't able to come up with any other strategy right now than you're on a good wicket and you should stay there. When it comes to solar, typically there's no magic number, but really for your business, if you're spending sort of north of $500 or more per month, that often makes the business case stack up a lot better. So there is no minimum, but that would be a rough guide.
And there's this interesting thing as well that you and I had spoken about, Alan, a little while ago. One of the conversations I've had, of the many conversations I've had with your team over the years, is that we wanted to change our supply to a carbon neutral one for the ethical reason. We wanted to have a more less of a footprint on the planet. And the conversation I had was that I was just naturally expecting that to be a more expensive thing. And I think for a long time, and maybe other business owners, maybe I'm in a minority here, but I thought that was a thing that if you're going to go solar, you're going to go the carbon neutral option, there's going to be a little bit of a cost to do that so that you can be doing the right thing for the planet. But that, in my experience, to flick out to carbon neutral in this one case study, I'm sure it's not always the case, it worked out to be more cost effective for our business anyway.
Yeah, and I think in the past, because we didn't have the solar and wind generation that is currently online at the moment, then definitely you had to pay a premium with a lot of providers to go for green power. But the cost of producing energy through solar and wind has come down quite considerably. And a lot of retailers are actually getting their generation from those assets as well. And so whilst with some retailers, there may be some small premium, that premium has certainly shrunk. But there's plenty of retailers that actually you can get 100% of your energy is carbon neutral, and it could be cheaper than you're buying it today. So we do have some customers that insist on having either producing their own power in a carbon neutral way through solar, and then when the sun is not shining, purchasing that power from the grid in a carbon neutral way as well. So yeah, that can often save you money. It doesn't necessarily have to cost more like it used to.
Yeah,
Dave, the funny thing about renewable energy is it's free. So
That is good, isn't it? Yeah.
when a business invests in, say, the hardware of a solar farm or a hydro plant, when the water runs or the sun shines, that power gets created for free over and over and over and over again. So a lot of these renewable assets, we started seeing businesses invest in the 2010s. And a lot of these businesses have recouped their upfront costs. So there are times in different states, particularly South Australia, where they've actually got too much power than they can use, and it becomes $0 to create it. So
yeah, because I think about this as well, and please keep throwing your questions in the chat box. We've got some more in the Q&A box. We've got some more that have been pre-registered, so I'll fire them in a sec. But when you talk about that free thing, we're talking about our new business lease, which is 5 years, and looking at putting solar on the roof. And you told me something, Chris, that I had just never even fathomed, which is at the end of our lease, if we move, you guys can uninstall the solar system, which we at that point would have completely paid off, and take it with us. And then we get free power, right, for as long as the life of the solar system works. Is that how that works?
that's right. It's not a permanent change to the infrastructure of the building. We just use existing screw lines on your trusses and beams. If a manufacturer moves site, they factor in a cost to move their equipment. This is just another piece of equipment. And if you've got a solution that creates $5,000 free power per year, over 10 years, that's 50 grand. And if it costs 3 or 4 grand to relocate it, it's still far cheaper than not creating your own free power on site.
And so then what is it like, if we're talking about this free power that you get once you pay your system off, using the modeling you kind of showed on the screen before, what's expectancy of a system like this? When does it stop being efficient? How long will these things last?
So the panels have a 25-year generation guarantee. And sometimes you may balk at such a length, but there's no moving parts in a panel. It's what we call a static technology. It just sits there. Where we have issues is an inverter, which convert the power to make it usable. They've got fans and they don't like it when it's too hot. They have a 10-year warranty, but typically 10 to 15-year lifespan. So that's why if you look at 10 years, then it's going to be far cheaper than what you're doing now with the guaranteed span under warranty. It becomes a bit of a no-brainer. And by the way, if you have an issue in 10 to 15 years, Dave, you don't need a whole new solar system. You might have a 400 panel system and you have an issue with the panel, we can replace one panel. Or you might have 4 inverters, you can replace an inverter. You don't need a whole new solar system.
And sorry, I'm geeking out a bit now, but so the tech is good enough to know which of the panels is working and not working, and you can isolate it and know which one to replace. Yeah,
spot on. So they're in strings and lines. If you picture your old Christmas lights where you had one light go out and the whole string went out, we've evolved from that. So we just flash test the panels, and we can check on the inverter where the challenge is coming from.
Cool. So I've got a few pre-registered questions. If you're still on the call and you want to have some questions with Chris and Alan there, consider them your energy consultants for the next. You've got 15 minutes of their time, like I've been doing. Chris, this one's for you. One of the questions that was registered before the event comes from a business who treats timber. Keen to learn more about how to control our energy. We treat timber and the cost is increasing and making it unviable for us to undertake treatment going forward. And I imagine there's other businesses like this, but what do these businesses do who've got a process that the energy costs are getting to the point where they can't make a margin on, can't successfully run a business? What do they do?
Well, outside of making sure you're on the best rate, creating your own power on site, effectively between 10 in the morning and 3 p.m, if you've got solar, your power then is free. So I was talking to a quarry yesterday and they crush rocks. So you wouldn't crush your rocks at 8 in the morning when solar wasn't working. You do it at 11 in the morning, you crush your rocks for free. We installed solar on a furniture manufacturer and they were starting their manufacturing at 4:30 in the morning, so that half of the day they were paying off-peak energy rates. Post solar, they found it much easier to recruit staff because they were able to manufacture from 7 till 3:30 because the curve of free power happened at about 9:30, 10 onwards. So there was no point setting the alarm at 3:30 to come in to try and beat high prices. So what you want is control. And if 100% of your energy is at the mercy of the grid and the free market, it's similar to a mortgage. I've got part of my mortgage fixed and part variable, taking a punt on the market, but the fixed, I know what I'm going to get. Where if you can create half of your power for free during the day, well, you're sort of fixing that part in. And as the cycles of power stations closing happen over time and you see spikes in energy prices, you're only going to get affected by parts of that happen outside of 10 in the morning till 3 p.m.
Yeah, super. And that was in my next question, Alan. I've got this one for you, mate, which is the idea of fixed and variable. Can you lock in a rate with a supplier, saying, I don't just want to, can you lock me in at this rate for the next X number of months or years?
Yeah, so when you've got a large market contract, then your rates are fixed. There are two different types. So you can have a smooth rate where you're going to be paying the same cents per kilowatt for peak and off peak this year, next year, and maybe the following year. Or you can arrange that in a stepped fashion to better financially suit you, where you'll be paying more in different years. And then if you've got an SME or a small market or a mass market agreement where you can move retailers, a lot of retailers are saying, look, whilst you can leave us at any point, we're not going to increase our price for 12 months. And we've been doing that with quite a few of them, given the recent price rises that have happened. Then yes, that they'll have hedging positions, Dave. So they'll have secured wholesale power at a certain rate, so they know that they can provide that at that price. So you can still get the advantage there of locking in with them so they won't increase your price. But if you ever wanted to leave them, you're free to do so as well.
Yeah, cool. Super. And then Chris, there's a couple of questions in here about the size of the system and as businesses, evolve and pivot and change direction and change size. How, one question is, I've already got solar installed. How do I know if I'm going to need some more, or how do you calculate what's going to give me the best return? Is there an equation that you guys do? Is the answer call choice? Is that what the answer is?
I can give you better than that. I actually personally helped 2 businesses last week that already had solar expand their system. So you can still attract additional funding. Funding is for reducing carbon, not one lot of funding per site. I would always err on putting less than more, because you can expand these solutions over time. If you oversize your system in 12 months, you can't take off panels. So if you install 50 kilowatts of solar and then in 2 years we do a review of how much power you're still using during the day, you can then add another 20 or 30, which will attract funding and tax write-offs and all of the same. So if you do have solar now and you still have a sizable bill and you've got more roof space, get in touch. It's kind of the solar market version 2.0. People that went solar initially, they were maybe misquoted or undersized because they were a bit nervous. Where now we can look at the data and we can finance the additional panels, so the savings they create on your bill pay for them. So you've got no acquisition cost.
Amazing. Awesome. Another question on here for you, Chris. A 24-hour business that's a 24-hour facility, batteries are a good idea, and this applies to my business as well. If we're looking at putting in a solar, we won't use as much power over the evenings just to run service for computers, but in this instance, they're a 24-hour facility. Is there a tipping point? I know earlier you mentioned that the savings should improve as technology improves a little bit, but what are we looking at?
So conceptually, yes, you can create extra power during the day. This is the challenge. You need enough roof space to create the power that you use during the day plus more to store. So Dave, your scenario might be that you can create your daytime power, but you may not have enough roof space to create nighttime power at the same time. The savings at nighttime for a 24-hour business, you pay less per unit of power. So keep in mind the savings aren't as big if you're only paying 15 cents at nighttime versus 25 cents during the day. Conceptually, yes, it does work. I still would err on waiting 2 to 3 years. One thing you can do with batteries without solar, by the way, is charge your batteries at midnight when it's off-peak power, and you can deploy that power during the day when power's at its most expensive. So there's lots of ways to, skin this cat. At the moment, while the grants are at the highest, the tax deductions at their highest, I would maximize my daytime solar. And then we would just stay in touch and keep looking at the numbers for when battery becomes viable. For me, an 8-year return on investment is too long. But if that comes down to 3 or 4 years, all of a sudden there'll be a run on batteries for nighttime usage.
Nice. Can I ask a silly question? In Melbourne, it's a beautiful sunny day. If I'm a timber trader, a furniture manufacturer, or someone who uses a lot of energy during the day for the purpose of manufacturing, and today's a good day, so we can do lots. If tomorrow it's overcast, do some people who run solar scale back production based on how much sun is shining?
Typically not. most businesses will make more money on income than savings on electricity. Solar still works when it's cloudy and cold, for example. You could have solar in Antarctica and it would work just fine. When we do a cost benefit analysis, we use 15 years of Bureau of Meteorology data. So the numbers are going to be the numbers based on sunny days, cloudy days, and everything in between. A bit of rain's good because panels attract dust and grit. And if you're in an industrial area, for example, a good bit of rain actually might increase your production the day after. So there are fluctuations in climate, if you've got an El Nino, this type of thing. But at the end of the day, solar doesn't know what day of the week it is or what year it is. It'll sit on your roof. It won't call in sick. It won't get COVID. It'll just generate power and you'll either use it or sell any excess back to the grid. And 9 times out of 10, that'll be far better than just continuing to buy all your power off a retailer.
And I'll just add one thing to that as well there, Dave. So that's why having that production guarantee is so important. If you're an owner of a solar system on your roof, it really doesn't matter whether the sun is shining or not, because you're not responsible for the production of the power of the system. That's on it should be on your solar installer. So that's for them to worry about rather than you. Yeah.
Super. And Alan, while we're chatting, there's a question in here about the use of comparison sites to kind of work out whether or not, which energy bill kind of is going to give me the best result, kind of cost-wise. What's your view on comparison sites in terms of for businesses?
So I think with comparison sites and the sort of self-serve sites, they have their uses for sure, but maybe they don't have the opportunity to contextualize the data. So to understand the seasonality of businesses and also use the granularity of data that a professional might take. Just as you can do your own sort of tax return and be compliant and stay out of jail, you probably find that working with a tax accountant, you might be able to get a better result.
Yeah, so it's literally, this expert piece is really important at the moment, I suppose, isn't it? Looking at our renewables, what are the trends with renewables? Where are we going over the next 18 to 24 months? Talking to an expert is really something that both, and I speak as a business owner, who's worked with you guys, it's easy to ask you guys what the question is. You guys can give an answer, but talking to an expert is a good piece of advice.
Dave, the one thing you can't get on a comparison website is all your network tariffs checked. So for a home, if you've got a straightforward tariff, I think it serves its purpose there. But anything outside of a small home bill, network costs are 50% of your bills, and the online comparison sites don't have the algorithms to go and check, because these network tariffs change every 12 months and it's just too convoluted and complex for AI to do it.
Great. And then maybe one last question. What about gas? We've talked a lot about electricity. How do we save money on our gas costs?
Again, that's going to be around timing. So gas costs are pretty uncontrollable in a lot of places at the moment. And there's a lot of, market pressures. That's about working with your expert broker to execute those contracts with the right timing. I would encourage anybody who has got a significant exposure to gas to speak with an expert, get an understanding of where the market is at, where the forward curve is at, and they can come up with a strategy to either forward contract or even potentially blend and extend the current contract that you're at, so that the hit isn't necessarily too bad when you come off contract. So speak to an expert, get their advice, and have a strategy. Don't just be at the mercy of the market.
Sensational. Well, that's all we've got time for today. It's been extremely insightful. I've had the luxury of having extensive chats with both of you at different points. I still learned quite a bit today. So thanks very much for the insights that you've shared and the generosity of your time and knowledge there. Please, if you're watching and you haven't yet connected with the guys at Choice, to ask questions or send a bill or send the emails you're getting from your energy supplier, to just get them to just give them a once over. That's certainly what I do anytime I get any correspondence, or when we move premises, or if we want to change anything with the energy strategy. I just get directly in touch with Choice, and it doesn't cost me anything differently to what I would normally pay. So I'd encourage you to do something like that as well. Thanks for your time and effort, Chris and Alan. And if you've got any questions, do get in touch with Choice. This video is going to be circulated to everyone who was registered. So if you want to watch it back or share it around, please do that as well. And of course, check out the Choice Energy website and connect with the guys for a complimentary energy assessment. Thanks again, and have a sensational afternoon. Take care.